The air was thick and humid, the kind of New York City summer day that makes your shirt stick to your back the moment you step outside. It was a Saturday, but the usual city bustle was drowned out by the excitement of 1,000 families gathered at the university's main quad. I stood a little apart from the crowd, a hand on my back pocket where my handkerchief sat, unused but ready. My name is Arthur Miller, and at 68 years old I've learned that life's most profound moments often feel the most mundane until they hit you. My granddaughter Emily was graduating today. She was the first of our family to earn a degree from a university this prestigious. A decade ago, after her father, my son Mark, remarried, I didn't think I would be here for this. He had made it clear that my role in their lives had been reduced to an afterthought, a faded photograph on a shelf. But here I was, invited to bear witness, a silent observer in the stands. Mark was a good man, or at least he used to be, the kind of son who, as a boy, would bring me a cup of coffee in the morning just to see me smile. But somewhere between his first divorce and his new marriage to Sarah, something shifted. He built a wall brick by brick, and I was on the outside. I spotted him now, a few rows ahead of me, his posture straight, his shoulders broad like mine used to be. He was with Sarah, his new wife, and her parents, Robert and Carol. They were a family unit, a perfect picture of suburban bliss, all smiles and quiet laughter. And then there was me, a ghost in the machine, a spare part. Robert, Sarah's father, a man a few years younger than me, was a successful architect. He had a smooth, confident air about him that I could never quite master. He always seemed to know the right thing to say, the right way to hold a conversation. His relationship with Mark was a mirror of what I'd always wanted with my son, easy, open, and filled with mutual respect. But that respect wasn't born of history, of shared struggles and victories. It was a manufactured thing, a comfortable lie. The ceremony began with a flourish of trumpets. Emily, her red cap and gown a beacon in the sea of graduates, walked with a grace that was all her own. I felt a swell of pride so strong it ached. My mind drifted back to a different time, to her 5th birthday. I had spent weeks building her a dollhouse, a small replica of the brownstone we used to live in. I'd carved the tiny furniture with my own hands, my fingers aching at the end of each day. When I gave it to her, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. That was my role then, the grandfather who built things, who made magic. Now, I was just a man with a ticket in his hand. After the speeches from the dean and the valedictorian, the time came for the special guest speaker. It was a tradition for a family member of a graduating student to give a short address. The dean announced Mark's name, and a murmur of appreciation went through the crowd. I straightened up, a nervous flutter in my chest. This was it. This was his chance to say something meaningful, to acknowledge the journey, to recognize the sacrifices. Maybe, just maybe, he would mention me. Mark walked to the podium, his voice clear and resonant over the loudspeakers. He spoke about the challenges and triumphs of his daughter's life, her dedication, her relentless pursuit of knowledge. He talked about the importance of family and the support system that helped her reach this milestone. My heart swelled, a foolish hope taking root. He glanced over at his wife's family in the front row, a warm smile on his face. Then he looked out at the audience, his gaze sweeping past me without a pause. And I want to extend a special thanks to someone who has been a true pillar of strength, he said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. Someone who showed me what it truly means to be a man, a father and a provider. He taught me the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and how to build something lasting. My father-in-law, Robert. The words hung in the humid air, each one a hammer blow to my chest. He was talking about a man he'd known for 10 years, a man who had never changed a tire for him, never taught him how to throw a baseball, never held him when he was scared of the dark. The crowd applauded, but the sound was muted, distant, as if I was hearing it from a great distance. I felt the color drain from my face. My hands, which had built things for him, which had once cradled him, were shaking. I thought about the late nights I'd worked to put him through college, the second job I'd taken to pay for his medical school applications. All the small sacrifices, the unspoken acts of love, were erased by a single sentence. I wasn't a pillar of strength. I was a footnote, a ghost. My son, in the presence of everyone, had chosen a stranger over me. He had declared a new role model, a new hero, and it wasn't me. My vision blurred, but I held it together. I was an old man, and old men didn't cry in public, not for something like this. The speech ended, and Mark walked back to his seat, a proud smile on his face. He kissed Sarah, and then he shook Robert's hand. I watched the whole exchange, a man outside a glass window, looking at a home he no longer belonged to. The rest of the ceremony was a haze of meaningless words and faces. The names of the graduates were called, one after another, but I didn't hear them. I only heard my son's voice, echoing in my mind, a cruel anthem to a life's work dismissed. When the ceremony finally ended, I stood up, my joints stiff, my back aching. I didn't wait for the celebratory photos or the handshakes. I couldn't bear to look at any of them, not Mark, not Sarah, not Robert. I turned and walked away, the hot summer sun beating down on me, but I felt a cold chill spread through my bones. I was a father without a son, a grandfather without a family, and a man without a legacy. I had to do something. But what? What could a ghost do to make himself seen again? The answer, I knew, lay not in anger, but in a quiet, measured response. It lay in finding a way to remind him and myself of the man I once was and the man I still am. The walk back to my car was a blur. The celebratory chatter of the families around me sounded like a foreign language, their joy a stark contrast to the hollow ache in my chest. The humid air, which moments ago had felt heavy and oppressive, now felt thin, as if I was struggling to breathe. I got into my old sedan, the leather seats hot against my skin, and just sat there for a long time. The keys dangled from the ignition, but I couldn't bring myself to turn them. I stared at the university's main gate, the throngs of people still spilling out, a river of happy faces, but all I could see was my son's face at the podium, his mouth moving, the words echoing in my head. My father-in-law, Robert. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over Mark's name. What was I going to say? What do you say to the son who just publicly erased you? Hey, Mark, congrats on the speech. By the way, thanks for the character assassination. No, that was the old Arthur, the one who fought and clawed for a piece of his son's attention, who let his hurt spill out in angry, clumsy words. That Arthur had been replaced by this new, quiet version, a man who understood that some fights were a waste of breath. This time my response had to be different. It had to be about action, not words. I started the car and drove aimlessly for a while, letting the familiar streets of the city guide me. The afternoon sun beat down, turning the asphalt into a shimmering, wavy surface. I passed the little park where I used to teach Mark how to ride his bike, the same park where he scraped his knee, and I carried him all the way home. The memories were vivid, sharp, and they hurt with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. I had to suppress them, to push them back into the dark corners of my mind, because if I let them consume me, I would just be a pile of dust on the side of the road. I finally pulled into a quiet diner on a side street, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. I sat alone, a cup of lukewarm coffee in front of me. I watched the steam rise from the mug, a silent, ephemeral thing, much like my own sense of self right now. The waitress, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, came to refill my coffee. She didn't say anything, and I was grateful for her silence. It was a silent acknowledgement of a man in pain, a small act of empathy. I thought about Robert. I didn't hate him. He was a good man, I suppose. He just happened to be the man who reaped the harvest I had sown. He was there for Mark during a time of great vulnerability, during the chaotic years after his first marriage failed. Mark had needed a new father figure, someone solid and reliable, and Robert, with his easy charm and his professional success, fit the bill perfectly. I, on the other hand, had been lost in my own grief after my wife Eleanor passed. I was a ship without a rudder, and I'd let my son's pain get swept away by the storm. I couldn't blame him entirely, but to have my contributions, my love, so completely erased, felt like a deliberate act of cruelty. That's when the idea came to me. It wasn't a sudden, brilliant flash of inspiration, but a slow, simmering thought that had been brewing under the surface since I heard the words leave his mouth. I had to do something that would make him see, not for my own validation, but for him. I needed him to remember who I was. I needed him to remember what a real father looked like, what a real family felt like. My mind went back to the old brownstone, the one I had built the dollhouse after. We sold it years ago, after Eleanor died. It was too big, too empty, but a piece of me still lived there in the echoes of laughter in the living room, in the faint scent of coffee and old books. The new owners, a young couple, had modernized it, stripped it of its character, and I had never been able to look at it the same way again. I knew what I had to do. I had to rebuild something, not just a dollhouse, but something real, something that was a testament to our history, a physical representation of the bond we once shared. I paid for my coffee and left, the plan solidifying in my mind. I would find an old house, a wreck, something with good bones, but in desperate need of revival. I would pour every ounce of my effort, every drop of sweat into bringing it back to life. It would be my project, my silent protest. It wouldn't be for sale. It would be for him, a gift he might never accept, a project he might never understand. It would be my legacy, something that proved my worth not with words, but with wood and steel and honest labor. My first call was to my old friend, Frank. He was a retired contractor, a man who had seen me through every stage of my life. He answered on the second ring, his voice as gruff and comforting as I remembered. "Arthur, you sound like you've seen a ghost. Everything all right?" he said. "Frank," I said, my voice steady now, filled with a new resolve. "I need your help. I'm going to build a house." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "A house? You've been retired for years. You've got more aches and pains than a junkyard dog," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "What brought this on?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. He'd known me for 40 years. He knew the unspoken things. "I need to build something," I said finally, the words hanging in the air. He was quiet again, and then I heard him sigh. "All right, old man. You get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow morning you and I are going to go find a project, but you're buying the donuts." I hung up the phone, a small, genuine smile on my face for the first time all day. It was a start, a small act of defiance. My son had his speech, his new role model. I had my hands, my memories, and a new purpose. It wouldn't be easy. The work would be long and hard, and I would be doing it alone in a sense. But I knew deep down that this was the only way to get through to him, not with words, but with a legacy built from the ground up, a testament to the man he had forgotten. The next morning, the sun was a bright, unforgiving orb in a cloudless sky. I met Frank at a coffee shop downtown, the aroma of roasted beans and sugar a comforting presence. He looked older than I remembered, his hair now a shock of white, his movements a little more deliberate, but the fire in his eyes was still there, the same determined gaze I'd seen on countless job sites. "So what's the plan, Arthur?" he asked, stirring his coffee. "Are we building a bungalow? A two-story?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, the heat a welcome sensation in my cold hands. "We're not building anything new, Frank. We're rebuilding. I want to find a derelict house, something that's been left to rot, something with a story." He raised a white eyebrow, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "A fixer-upper, then? You're not getting any younger, you know. This isn't just about hammering a few nails." "I know," I said, my voice firm. "It's about a lot more than that." He didn't press. He understood. That was the beauty of a long friendship. There were no explanations needed, only a shared understanding of life's unspoken pains. We spent the rest of the morning in his old pickup truck, driving through the city's older neighborhoods. We passed by grand old brownstones, their brick facades and elegant ironwork, speaking of a more opulent time. Then we drove to the outskirts, where the houses were smaller, the yards less manicured, the history a little more worn. We looked at a few properties, but none of them felt right. One had a foundation that was completely shot. Another was infested with termites. I was looking for a shell, something with a good, solid foundation, a soul that had just been neglected. And then we found it. It was on a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn. A two-story frame house, its white paint peeling, its windows boarded up. The lawn was a jungle of weeds and dead bushes. A for-sale sign, faded and bent, leaned precariously in the overgrown grass. It was a mess, a heartbreaking sight. But as I walked around it, I felt a strange pull. The porch sagged, the front door was off its hinges, but I could see the ghost of a happy family inside. I could imagine a mother hanging laundry on the back porch, a father mowing the lawn, a child running through the front door. It had a story, a history, a soul that was just waiting to be brought back to life. I turned to Frank, a determined look on my face. "This is the one." He looked at me, then at the house, a long, critical gaze. "Arthur, this is a mess. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of backbreaking work." "I know," I said, "and I'm ready." We walked around the back, and I saw a small detached garage, its wooden door warped and caved in. It was a secondary project, but it was just as important. It was a place where a father could teach his son how to use a saw, how to fix an engine. A place where memories could be made, where a legacy could be built. Frank put a hand on my shoulder. "For you're a stubborn old man, you know that?" he said with a fond shake of his head. "All right, I'll get the paperwork started. You start thinking about what we need. This isn't just a house, it's a statement. And it's going to take every ounce of our combined wisdom and stubbornness to get it done." Over the next few weeks, the house became my entire world. Frank, true to his word, had handled the paperwork and the permits, and we were officially the owners of the most dilapidated house on the block. We started with the basics, tearing down the rotted wood, pulling up the old stained carpets, and gutting the kitchen. It was messy, grueling work, but with every piece of debris we hauled out, I felt a sense of purpose returning to me. The dust and grime, the sweat and the ache in my muscles felt like a cleansing, a penance for a past I couldn't change. I didn't tell Mark about the house. I couldn't. It was my secret, my personal mission. He had moved on with his life, and I had to find a way to move on with mine. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about reclaiming the man I used to be, the man who built things, the man who was proud of the work of his hands. One afternoon, as I was prying off a stubborn piece of siding, I heard a car pull up in the street. I looked up and saw a familiar face getting out of a shiny black sedan. It was Robert, Mark's father-in-law. My heart started to pound in my chest. He looked at me, then at the house, a look of mild surprise on his face. He walked up to me, his hands in his pockets, a polite, curious smile on his face. "Arthur, isn't it?" he said, his voice as smooth as I remembered. "Mark told me you were doing some sort of project, but a whole house, this is ambitious." I wiped the sweat from my brow, leaving a streak of dirt on my face. I looked him straight in the eye, not a hint of a flinch. "It is," I said, my voice a little hoarse from the dust. "But a man's got to do something with his time. Can't just sit around, can I?" He looked at me, then at the house, and I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not respect, not admiration, but something else. Pity. It was a look that said, "This poor broken old man is trying to prove his worth with a house." It was a look that said, "You're too late. Mark has already moved on." He held out his hand. "Well, good luck with it. It looks like you'll need it." I shook his hand, his grip firm, but I didn't return the politeness. I didn't thank him, I just stared at him, my eyes hard, my jaw set. I had nothing to prove to him. My project wasn't for his approval. It was for me. I wanted him to see that I wasn't just a ghost. I was a man with a hammer in his hand and a purpose in his heart. He smiled, a little uncomfortably, and then got back into his car and drove away. I watched him go, and as the dust from his car settled, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was right. This was ambitious, it was crazy, but it was mine. And with every nail I hammered, every board I cut, I was not only rebuilding a house, I was rebuilding myself. And that, I knew, was a far more important project. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The old house on the quiet Brooklyn street became my second home, my refuge. Frank was there every day, a steady, silent presence, his expertise invaluable. He would arrive with a thermos of coffee and a new set of plans, his mind a steel trap of measurements and building codes. We worked in a rhythm, a silent dance of two old men and a hammer. We started with the bones of the house, reinforcing the foundation, replacing rotted joists and strengthening the walls. The work was grueling, and my body, which had been accustomed to a life of quiet retirement, protested with every ache and groan. But with every piece of new wood we installed, every creak we silenced, I felt a little more of my old self returning. My project became a curiosity in the neighborhood. The old lady across the street, Mrs. Rodriguez, would bring us cold lemonade on hot days. A young couple from next door, expecting their first child, would stop by to ask about our progress, their eyes filled with a shared dream of home ownership. They didn't know the full story, of course. They just saw two old men bringing a broken house back to life. They saw hope. I had been good at this a lifetime ago. Before Mark's mother, Eleanor, got sick, I was a carpenter by trade. I built furniture, cabinets, small things. But this was different. This was on a grander scale. It was a tangible representation of a legacy I was trying to reclaim. The old smell of sawdust, the satisfying thud of a nail being driven home, the feel of a perfectly planned board. It all came back to me. It felt like coming home. One day, while tearing down an interior wall, I found a small, dusty box tucked into a hollow space between the studs. I pried it open and found a collection of old black and white photographs. They were of a young family, a mother, a father, and two small children. Their smiles faded but still visible. They were building something too. A life. It was a poignant discovery, a ghost of the past. It reminded me that every house holds a story, a tapestry of joy and sorrow, of love and loss. I carefully placed the box aside, a quiet promise to the old family that their story wouldn't be forgotten. I would weave it into the new one I was creating. The work was also a form of therapy. The physical labor was a distraction from the turmoil inside me, the constant loop of my son's words. But at night, in the quiet of my apartment, the memories would come flooding back. The baseball games, the late-night talks, the pride in his eyes when he showed me his report card. It was all there, vivid and painful. I had to remind myself that this house wasn't a punishment for him. It was a way for me to find peace. It was a way for me to show him, without saying a word, that my love was not conditional, that it was a foundation as strong as the one I was rebuilding. As we moved from the structural work to the finishing touches, the house began to take shape. The new windows let in a flood of light, illuminating the freshly painted walls. The floors, once stained and warped, now gleamed with a new coat of varnish. The kitchen, with its clean lines and modern appliances, was a far cry from the cramped old-fashioned one that had been there before. Frank was a marvel, his attention to detail impeccable. We were a well-oiled machine, two old friends working on a project that meant more to us than just a house. I made a point of documenting every step of the process. I took pictures, a physical record of the transformation. I wrote down the names of the neighbors who helped, the jokes Frank made, the little victories we celebrated. I kept it all in a journal, a chronicle of my journey. It was for me, of course, but a part of me hoped that one day Mark might see it. He might understand the effort, the love, the sheer stubbornness that had gone into this. One evening, as I was sweeping up the last of the sawdust, I heard a car pull up. I looked outside and saw Mark's sedan. My heart jumped into my throat. He got out of the car looking a little awkward, his hands in his pockets. He walked up to the house, his eyes wide. He looked at the new siding, the freshly painted trim, the bright new door. He ran his hand over the porch railing, the one I had rebuilt with my own two hands. "Dad," he said, his voice a little strained. What is this?" "It's a house, Mark," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "A project." He looked at me, his gaze sweeping over my dusty clothes, my tired hands, my paint-splattered face. He saw me, really saw me, for the first time in a long time. The pity was gone. It was replaced by something else, a flicker of recognition, a hint of confusion. "I didn't know you were doing this," he said, his voice softer now. "Why?" And I knew in that moment that this was my chance, not to berate him, not to unload my hurt, but to simply state the truth. "I had to build something," I said, my eyes holding his. "I had to." He looked at the house again, then back at me. He was searching for an answer, a reason, and he was finding none. He was just seeing the work, the effort, the love I had poured into it. And he saw me. He saw his father not as a broken old man, but as a man who was still building things. And that was enough for now. The conversation was just beginning, and I knew it would be a long and difficult one. But at least we were finally talking. The visit from Mark was short but significant. He didn't stay long, just long enough to walk through the first floor, a silent observer in a world I had created with my own two hands. He ran his hand over the new kitchen counter, his expression unreadable. He looked at the photographs of the construction process I had tacked to a temporary wall in the living room, me and Frank, covered in sawdust, a crooked grin on my face as I nailed a new board into place. He didn't say much, but his silence spoke volumes. It was a mixture of awe and confusion, of a son seeing his father as a stranger, and yet at the same time, as the man he always knew. After he left, the house felt different. The air was charged with a new energy, a new purpose. It was no longer just a project for me. It was now a bridge, a potential path back to my son. Frank, ever the pragmatist, just shook his head. "Well, that was a start," he said, and went back to sanding a doorframe. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. We were nearing the finish line. We installed the light fixtures, laid the last of the tiles in the bathroom, and painted the final coat of trim. The house was no longer a shell. It was a home. It was a testament to the old-fashioned way of doing things, of putting your heart and soul into the work, of building something that would last. I had decided to furnish it myself, not with new, sterile pieces, but with salvaged furniture I found in flea markets and antique shops. I spent hours sanding, staining, and polishing old wooden chairs and tables, breathing new life into them. It felt right. The furniture, like the house, had a history, a story that was waiting to be told. I found an old wooden rocking chair that reminded me of the one my father used to sit in. I polished it until it shone, imagining the generations that would sit in it, a quiet witness to the lives lived within these walls. My granddaughter, Emily, came to visit a few times. She was the one member of my family who had stayed connected, who still called me every week. She was a breath of fresh air, a ray of sunshine in the grey world I had been living in. She brought me coffee and talked about her new job, her voice full of life and a future I was a small part of. She walked through the house, her hands touching the walls, her eyes full of pride. "Grandpa," she said one day, her voice full of emotion, "this is beautiful. It's you. It's all the things you taught me." She was talking about the little things, the way I had taught her how to hold a hammer, how to use a screwdriver, how to fix a leaky faucet. She remembered it all, the small moments that her father had forgotten. It was a gift, her remembering. It was the validation I had been seeking, not from my son, but from the generation that came after him. One afternoon, a few months after his first visit, Mark came back. This time, he didn't come alone. He brought Sarah, his wife, and Robert and Carol, her parents. My heart sank. This was a new level of confrontation. I stood on the porch, my hands in my pockets, trying to appear calm. "Dad," Mark said, his voice a little strained, "I wanted to show them what you've been doing." Robert stepped forward, a polite, curious smile on his face. He looked at the house, his head tilted to one side. He was an architect, after all. He was used to looking at things from a professional perspective. He walked around the outside, his eyes scanning the new siding, the straight lines of the windows. He ran his hand over the new door, a small, subtle nod of appreciation. "Arthur," he said, his voice professional and controlled, This is excellent work. You've restored it beautifully. I'm impressed." Sarah and Carol were more effusive. They oohed and ahed at the new kitchen, the gleaming floors. They talked about the light, the good vibes of the house. Mark was silent, his gaze fixed on me. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at me, searching for something, a key to a lock he hadn't known was there. "It's not just a house, is it, Arthur?" Robert said, his voice a little softer now. He wasn't speaking as a rival, but as a man who understood. He saw the heart and soul I had poured into it. He saw the craftsmanship, the love, the legacy I was trying to rebuild. "This is a masterpiece." The word masterpiece hung in the air. It was a word I had never thought would be associated with my work. But it wasn't just about the house. It was about the statement, the story, the silent protest I was making. I didn't say anything, just looked at my son, whose face was a mixture of pride, confusion, and a burgeoning sense of shame. He was seeing the work, and he was seeing the cost. He was seeing the father he had so carelessly dismissed, and he was seeing the man who had never stopped trying. They left soon after, their words of praise hanging in the air. I stood on the porch, the silence a welcome sound. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from anger or hurt. It was from a strange, new feeling. Hope, a small, fragile hope that this house, this testament to my life's work, might finally be the bridge that led me back to my son. The days that followed were filled with a tense, expectant silence. Mark didn't call. I didn't call. The house was finished, every detail perfected, every flaw addressed. It stood as a beacon of my life's work, a monument to a past that I was determined to not let fade away. The weather had turned, and a persistent cold rain had settled over the city, a grey shroud that matched the mood I was in. I was at the house doing a final inspection when I heard a car pull up. I didn't look up, assuming it was a neighbor, but then I heard the car door slam and I knew. It was Mark. I braced myself. He didn't come to the door. He stood on the sidewalk, a solitary figure in the rain, his shoulders hunched, his hands in his pockets. I walked out and stood under the small overhang of the porch, the rain a steady drumming on the roof. "It's pouring," I said, my voice quiet. "You'll get soaked." He didn't move. He just looked at me, his eyes dark, his face a mask of unspoken emotions. "Why?" he finally said, the word a small, desperate plea. Why did you build this, Dad? Why now? I took a deep breath. I told you, son. I had to build something. I needed to. But why this? He said, his voice rising a little. A whole house. Do you have any idea how hard this must have been? Why didn't you ask me for help? Why didn't you tell me? Because you were busy, I said, the words coming out more harshly than I intended. You were busy with your new life, with your new father figure. You made it pretty clear at Emily's graduation that I was no longer needed. The words hung in the rain-soaked air, each one a sharp, painful jab. He flinched, his face twisting with a sudden raw emotion. You think that's what I meant? He said, his voice full of disbelief. Dad, I was trying to give a speech, a good speech. Robert's been a great support for Sarah, and he's taught me a lot about business, about being a professional. He's been a good mentor, but he's not you. But you called him a role model, I said, my voice trembling with a frustration that had been building for months. Do you have any idea what that did to me? You publicly declared that a man you've known for 10 years is a better man than your own father. He ran a hand through his wet hair, a gesture of exasperation. That wasn't what I meant. I was just trying to be diplomatic. I was thanking him for his help. I never meant to hurt you, Dad. I'm sorry. The words "I'm sorry" were a soft balm on a raw wound, but they weren't enough. Not yet. Sorry isn't enough, Mark, I said, the words a low, steady whisper. Do you know what it felt like to be sitting there watching you, knowing that I'd poured my entire life into you, and to hear you say those words? It felt like a punch to the gut. It felt like I was a ghost. He looked at me, and I saw the shame, the guilt, the realization of the damage he had done. He saw the tired old man standing in front of him, the man who had built him a dollhouse, who had taught him how to throw a baseball, who had held him when he was scared. I didn't think, he said, the words barely a whisper. I didn't think. No, I said, my voice hardening. You didn't. You forgot. You forgot the years of sacrifices, the late nights, the second job I took to pay for your education. You forgot what it meant to be a family. You just replaced me. He was quiet for a long time, the rain dripping from the brim of his cap. He looked at the house, then back at me. He finally understood. This wasn't just a house. It was a symbol. It was a cry for help, a desperate attempt to be seen again. What do we do now? He finally said, his voice full of a heartbreaking vulnerability. I didn't answer right away. I didn't have an answer. The rain was still coming down, a steady, relentless reminder of the cold, hard truths we had just faced. I don't know, I said honestly, but we have to start somewhere, and I think we're finally starting. He nodded, and for the first time in a very long time he took a step forward, closing the distance between us. He didn't reach for me. He just stood there, a few feet away, a son and a father, separated by a lifetime of hurt and a few inches of space. The rain was coming down harder now, but for the first time it didn't feel cold. It felt like a cleansing, a washing away of the past, a slow and painful start to a new beginning. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world a clean, glistening green. The air was cool and crisp, a welcome change from the humid heat of the summer. Mark came back the next day, and this time he came alone. He didn't say a word, just walked into the house and sat on the newly installed porch swing. I brought him a cup of coffee, the steam rising in the cool morning air. We sat in silence for a long time, the quiet a new kind of comfort. I've been thinking, he said finally, his voice low and steady, about what you said, about everything. I waited. I didn't push him. I just listened. A father finally listening to his son, not with judgment, but with an open heart. You're right, he said, his gaze fixed on the street. I did forget. I got so caught up in my new life, in my new family, that I forgot the old one. I forgot where I came from. I forgot you. He looked at me, his eyes full of a remorse so profound it took my breath away. I'm so sorry, Dad, I really am. I never meant to hurt you. I took you for granted. I thought you would always be there, that you would always understand. That's the thing about fathers, Mark, I said, my voice gentle. We always do, we always understand. But sometimes we just need to be seen. He nodded, a single, decisive motion. He looked at the house, his eyes taking in the details he had missed on his previous visit. The intricate woodwork, the careful paint job, the way the light streamed through the new windows. He saw the love, the painstaking effort, the story I had built with my own 2 hands. "Robert's a good man," he said, his voice a little strained. "He helped me with some things I was struggling with. He was a mentor, a guide, but he's not you. He's not the man who taught me how to fish, how to throw a baseball. He's not the man who stayed up all night with me when I had the flu. He's not the man who taught me what it means to be a father." The words were a lifeline, a rope thrown into the stormy sea of my emotions. He wasn't just apologizing. He was seeing me. He was acknowledging the bond that had been severed, and he was trying to mend it. "I should have told you about the speech," he said. "I should have told you what I was going to say, but I didn't want to make things awkward. I didn't want to bring up the past. I was trying to move on." "Moving on doesn't mean forgetting, Mark," I said. "It means taking the past with you. It means learning from it." He nodded again, and then he stood up and walked over to the side of the house, where the old wooden boards were piled up, waiting to be carted away. He picked one up, his fingers running over the splintered wood. "This is a lot of work," he said, his voice full of a new kind of respect. "A lot of hard work." "It was," I said, "but it was worth it." He turned to me, his eyes filled with a new resolve. "I want to help. I know it's too late for most of it, but is there anything I can do, anything at all?" I looked at my son, at his face, at his eyes, and I saw the man he had become, the successful lawyer, the loving father, the man who had lost his way, but was now trying to find his way back. And I knew exactly what he could do. "There's the garage," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "It's still a wreck. Needs a new roof, new walls, the whole thing." He looked at the small, dilapidated structure, and a genuine smile broke through the solemnity on his face. "A father-son project?" he said. "A father-son project," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's about time." And in that moment, as we stood on the porch, a few feet apart, I felt the space between us closing. The chasm of hurt and misunderstanding was finally starting to shrink. We had a long way to go, but we were on the right path. The house was a symbol of my love, a monument to a father's devotion. But the garage, the small, broken-down garage, was a symbol of something even more important, a son's return. The garage project became our ritual. Every Saturday morning, Mark would show up in his work clothes, a toolbox in hand, a thermos of coffee for me. He wasn't the clumsy boy who used to struggle with a hammer, but he was no expert either. I was the teacher again, and he was the student. I taught him how to measure twice and cut once, how to drive a nail straight, how to read a blueprint. He listened with a quiet patience, his eyes focused on my hands, his mind absorbing every piece of information. The work was slow and methodical, a world away from the fast-paced, high-pressure life he led as a lawyer. We worked in a comfortable silence, punctuated by the rhythmic thud of a hammer, the whir of a saw. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't talk about the graduation, the speech, the hurt. We just worked, our hands and our hearts focused on the task at hand. It was a different kind of conversation, a language we hadn't spoken in years. It was a language of shared purpose, of mutual respect, of a love that was finally finding its way back to the surface. Sometimes Emily would come by, her eyes wide with curiosity, as she watched her father and grandfather working together. She would bring us sandwiches and cold drinks, her presence a silent blessing on our little project. She understood, in a way that I hadn't realized, that this wasn't just about building a garage, it was about rebuilding a family. Frank would stop by occasionally, a knowing smile on his face. He'd offer a few words of advice, a few jokes, and then he'd leave us to it. He knew that this was a private matter, a father-son project that couldn't be rushed or interfered with. He was a good friend, a quiet witness to the healing process. As the garage began to take shape, the conversation started to flow, slowly, hesitantly at first, and then with a new kind of ease. We talked about his childhood, about his mother, about the small moments we had shared. We talked about his work, the cases he was working on, the clients he was helping. He talked about his new life with Sarah and her family, and he didn't make excuses. He just spoke openly and honestly about the good times and the bad. "Robert's a good man," he said one day, as we were putting up the last piece of siding. "He's kind. He's a good father to Sarah. But he's not you, Dad. He's not my father. He can't replace the memories we have. He can't replace the things you taught me." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The words were enough. They were a gift, a final, beautiful apology. One afternoon, as we were finishing up, I took a picture of him. He was covered in sawdust, a smudge of paint on his cheek. his hands calloused and tired. He looked at me, a genuine smile on his face, and I saw the boy I had raised, the man he had become all in one. I took a picture of him, not of the garage, but of him, a tangible reminder of the day he came back to me. The garage was finished in the fall. It stood next to the house, a smaller, more humble version of its counterpart, but just as beautiful. It had a new roof, new walls, a solid foundation. It was a place where a father could teach his son, where a son could learn from his father. It was a place of healing, of reconciliation, of a love that had been lost and was now found. The house was ready to be sold, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was a part of me now. It was a part of my story. It was a testament to a love that had been tested and had passed the test. The house was not just a symbol anymore. It was a home. I decided not to sell it. I had worked too hard, and the house had come to mean too much. It was the physical embodiment of my journey back to myself and my son. I put up a for rent sign, and within a week the young couple from next door, the one expecting their first child, came by, their eyes wide with a quiet hope. They had been looking for a place like this, a place with a history, a soul. I met them for coffee and told them the story of the house, not with any sense of self-pity, but with a quiet pride. I told them about the old family whose photos I had found, about the memories I had unearthed, and about the man I had become again. They listened, their hands clasped together, their eyes filled with a shared dream. They wanted to start their own family here, to build their own memories. It felt right. The house, which had been a ghost of a past, was now a new home for a new family. Mark came to help me with the move-in. He carried boxes, moved furniture, and even helped hang pictures. He was a different man, his presence in the house not a source of tension, but a source of peace. He was my son again, a part of my life, a part of my story. One evening, after we had finished helping the couple move in, we sat on the porch swing, a small, shared victory. The air was cool, and a soft glow emanated from the windows of the house. The young couple was inside, their laughter a new, welcome sound. "Dad," Mark said, his voice soft, "thank you for everything." I didn't need to ask what he was thanking me for. The words were a quiet acknowledgement of the journey we had been on, the pain we had overcome, the love we had rediscovered. "You're welcome, son," I said, a small, genuine smile on my face. "You're welcome." I had found my purpose again, not in the big, grand gestures, but in the small, quiet moments, in the work of my hands, in the healing of my heart, in the reconciliation with my son. I had not only built a house, I had rebuilt a family. The call from Emily came a few months later, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Grandpa, we're having a family reunion, a big one, at the house." I didn't have to ask which house she meant. It was the house. The house that had been a wreck, a ghost, a silent protest. Now it was a gathering place, a symbol of our new beginning. I spent the week leading up to the reunion preparing. I mowed the lawn, trimmed the hedges, and made sure every corner of the house was spotless. The young couple who rented it, Sarah and David, were just as excited. They had come to see the house not just as a place to live, but as a part of a larger story, a testament to a love that had been lost and found again. On the day of the reunion, the house was a flurry of activity. Mark and Sarah arrived with their children, Emily and her younger brother Alex. Robert and Carol were there too, their presence a little awkward at first, but soon settling into a comfortable rhythm. They brought a bottle of wine, a small peace offering, and a quiet acknowledgement of the past. The day was filled with laughter, with stories, with food and drink. I watched from the porch as my entire family, new and old, came together. I saw Mark talking to Robert, not as a rival, but as a man who was secure in his own skin, in his own history. I saw him with Emily and Alex, a loving father, a man who was learning to be present in his children's lives. Emily came up to me, her arm linked in mine. "This is a beautiful house, Grandpa," she said, her voice soft. "It's full of love." I looked at the house, then at my granddaughter. "It is," I said, "and I have you to thank for it." She looked at me, her eyes a little confused. "Me? Why?" "Because you were the one who always kept calling," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You never gave up on me. You were the one who always reminded me of who I was." She leaned her head on my shoulder, a quiet understanding passing between us. She was my rock, my beacon in the storm. She had been the constant, the one person who had never let me go. That evening, as the sun began to set, Mark walked up to me, a cup of coffee in his hand. He stood with me on the porch, a comfortable silence settling between us. We watched the sun sink below the horizon, a fiery orange and purple sky. "Dad," he said, his voice a little hoarse, "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing to be seen. You've always been there. I stopped looking." I looked at him, at his face, at his eyes, and I saw a man who had finally found his way back home. "I'm here now, Dad," he said, his voice full of a new resolve. "I'm here." And I knew he was. Not just for a day, not for a reunion, but for good. He was a son who had lost his way, and a father who had never stopped waiting. And now, in this house, in this quiet moment, we were together again. The success of the reunion became a catalyst for something more profound. It was a new beginning, not just for my relationship with Mark, but for my relationship with Robert. After the reunion, Robert came to me, a small sketch pad in his hand. "Arthur," he said, his voice a little hesitant, "I was wondering if you'd be interested in a partnership." I looked at him, a little taken aback. "A partnership? What kind?" He opened the sketch pad, revealing a beautiful, detailed blueprint of a new housing development. "I've been working on a project. A small development of custom homes for families who want to build something that's truly their own. I've got the designs, the permits, the financing, but I need someone who understands the heart of a home. I need a builder, not just a contractor. I need you." I looked at the designs, at the elegant lines, the thoughtful details, and I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. A passion for my craft, a desire to build something new, something lasting. He wasn't just offering me a job. He was offering me a chance to build a new legacy, not just for myself, but for our families. We started small with a single house. Mark came on weekends, not just to help, but to learn. He was a natural, a man who had finally found his calling, not just in the courtroom, but in the sawdust and the sweat of honest labor. He was the son I had always known he could be, a man who was not afraid to get his hands dirty, a man who was not afraid to learn from his father. Robert was a different kind of mentor. He was an artist, a man who saw the world in lines and angles, in light and shadow. We worked together, not as rivals, but as partners, our different skills and experiences complementing each other. He was the architect, the visionary. I was the builder, the man who brought his visions to life. The first house we built was a beautiful two-story home with a wraparound porch and a large, welcoming living room. It was a fusion of his modern vision and my old-fashioned craftsmanship. It was a testament to our new partnership, a symbol of a legacy that was not about a single man, but about a family, about a community. The day we finished, we all gathered on the porch, a small celebratory moment. Mark was there, his hands in his pockets, a proud smile on his face. Emily and Alex were there too, their eyes wide with a quiet awe. Robert and Carol were there, their faces filled with a shared sense of accomplishment. "To the Miller and Evans partnership," Robert said, raising a glass, "to building a new legacy." I looked at my son, at his face, at his eyes, and I knew that this was it. This was the moment. The day he had publicly dismissed me was a distant memory, a painful chapter in a story that was now full of hope and promise. I had not only reclaimed my purpose, I had found a new one. I had not only rebuilt a house, I had built a legacy. And this time it was a legacy that was not just mine, but ours. The partnership flourished. Our small housing development grew, one beautiful home at a time. Each house was a work of art, a fusion of Robert's architectural genius and my hands-on craftsmanship. We were a team, a quiet, effective force in the building world. Mark, too, became an integral part of the business. He handled the legal side of things, the contracts, the permits, the business dealings. He was our right-hand man, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. My life was full again. I was busy, fulfilled, and most importantly, I was a part of something bigger than myself. The pain of the past was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was no longer a constant presence. It was a memory, a lesson learned, a part of a story that had a happy ending. Emily, too, was a part of our new legacy. She came to the job sites, her camera in hand, documenting our progress, creating a visual story of our work. She posted the pictures on a blog she had created, a quiet, beautiful chronicle of our journey. Her words were as beautiful as her photographs, a testament to the love and the labor that went into each house. She wasn't just an observer. She was a storyteller, a keeper of our history. One day, as we were working on a new house, I saw Emily talking to her father, pointing at a small detail, a piece of intricate woodwork I had designed. She was talking with a passion I hadn't seen in her before, her eyes bright with a new kind of purpose. "Dad," she said, her voice full of excitement, "this is amazing. I want to learn. I want to learn how to do this." Mark looked at me, a silent, knowing smile on his face. He knew. He knew the feeling, the pull of the tools, the satisfaction of creating something with your own two hands. He saw the next generation, a young woman who was not afraid to get her hands dirty, a woman who was not afraid to build a legacy of her own. "You should, honey," he said, his voice full of pride. "Your grandfather's a master. He can teach you everything you need to know." I smiled, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. The story was continuing. The legacy was not just mine or Mark's or even Robert's. It was ours. It was a shared dream, a shared purpose, a shared future. It was a legacy built on love, on forgiveness, on a quiet, determined spirit that refused to be broken. It was a new chapter, a new beginning, a new generation of builders. And it was just getting started. Life had a way of surprising you. Just when you thought you had a handle on things, a new wrinkle would appear, a new twist in the story. It had been a few years since the garage project, since the house, since the new legacy we had been building. Our business was a success, a small local enterprise that was known for its quality, its integrity, and its quiet, unassuming grace. One evening, Mark called me. "Dad," he said, his voice a little hesitant, "Sarah and I are having a small dinner party. Just the family. We'd like you to come. Robert and Carol will be there too." My heart did a little flutter in my chest. A dinner party, with my son, his wife, and his in-laws. It was a new kind of test. I didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored," I said. I arrived at their beautiful suburban home, a little nervous, a little unsure of what to expect. Sarah greeted me with a warm hug, her eyes filled with a genuine welcome. Robert and Carol were there too, their smiles a little more genuine now, their presence no longer a source of tension, but a source of quiet friendship. The dinner was a quiet affair, filled with good food, good wine, and good conversation. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about the present, about the houses we were building, about the families we were helping. We talked about Emily and her burgeoning career as a photographer and a builder, a fusion of her two passions. We talked about the future, about the new projects we had planned, about the legacy we were building together. After dinner, we all sat in the living room, a comfortable silence settling between us. Mark walked over to me, a small, beautifully carved wooden box in his hand. "Dad," he said, his voice a little thick with emotion, "I wanted to give you something. I found this in a little antique shop downtown. It reminded me of you." I opened the box, my hands trembling a little. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a small, exquisitely carved wooden house. It was a perfect miniature replica of the first house we had rebuilt, the one that had started it all. The windows were detailed, the porch was perfect, the roof was shingled with tiny, meticulously placed pieces of wood. It was a masterpiece, a work of art. "I found the man who made it," he said, his voice a little choked up. "He's a local artist." I told him the story of the house, of what it meant to us. He said it was an honor to build it. I picked up the little house, my fingers tracing the lines of the roof, the tiny details of the windows. It was a physical representation of our journey, a tangible reminder of a love that had been lost and was now found. It was a gift that was not about a house but about a family, about a father and a son, about a love that had come full circle. I looked at Mark, at his face, at his eyes, and I saw a man who had finally found his way back home. And I knew that this was a new beginning, a new chapter, a new legacy, and it was just getting started. The years passed, as they have a habit of doing. Our business, the Miller-Evans Partnership, became a respected name in the building world. We built beautiful, functional, and meaningful homes. Mark had left his law practice, dedicating himself full-time to the business. Emily, after graduating college, joined us, bringing her creativity and her keen eye for design. We were a family business, a legacy built on the solid foundation of love, forgiveness, and a shared purpose. My health, as is the case with men my age, had started to wane. My back ached, my knees protested with every step, and my hands, which had built so many things, were now a little shaky. I had to slow down, to step back, to let the younger generation take over. It wasn't easy, but it was a quiet, necessary transition. I was a consultant now, a mentor, a storyteller. I sat in my old rocking chair, the one I had refurbished, and watched my son and my granddaughter carry on the legacy. One day, Mark came to me, a serious look on his face. "Dad," he said, his voice a little low, "I've got an idea, a big one." He opened a large portfolio, revealing a beautiful, detailed blueprint of a new project. It was a community, a small, self-sufficient community of homes, all designed with the same care and attention to detail as the ones we had been building. It was a beautiful, ambitious project, a new legacy that was a testament to all we had learned. "I want to call it Miller's Grove," he said, his eyes filled with a new kind of pride. "A tribute to you, to everything you've taught me." Tears welled up in my eyes. The name, Miller's Grove, was a tribute not just to me, but to the man I had become again. It was a tribute to the family we had become, the love we had found, the legacy we had built. I looked at my son, at his face, at his eyes, and I saw the man he had become, the son who had lost his way and had now found his purpose, the man who had forgotten his father and had now built a monument to him. "It's a beautiful idea, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful idea." He smiled, a genuine, beautiful smile, and I knew that the final test had been passed, not just for him, but for me. The pain of the past was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of peace. The journey had been long, but it had been worth it. I had not only built a house, I had built a new life. I had not only found my way back to my son, I had found my way back to myself, and that, I knew, was a legacy worth more than all the houses in the world. The final chapter of my story is not about the end, but about a new beginning. I stand in the center of Miller's Grove, a bustling community of beautiful homes, a testament to a legacy etched in stone and wood. The air is filled with the sound of children's laughter, the quiet hum of life, the shared dream of a community built on love and a shared purpose. The pain of the past, the humiliation of that day at the graduation, is a distant memory, a small, insignificant note in a symphony of joy. My relationship with Mark is stronger than it has ever been, a bond forged in the fire of adversity, a love that has been tested and has passed the test. He is a good man, a good father, a good son. He is the man I always knew he could be. Emily is an artist, a builder, a storyteller. She has found her purpose, her voice, her own unique way of carrying on the legacy. She is a beautiful, strong, independent woman, a testament to a family that has overcome a great deal of pain and has come out stronger on the other side. And Robert and Carol, too, are a part of our story. Our families are intertwined now, a quiet, comfortable blend of two very different histories. We are not just colleagues, we are friends. We are a family bound not by blood, but by a shared purpose, a shared love, a shared legacy. I sit in my rocking chair now, a quiet observer of the world I helped to create. My hands are old, my back is sore, but my heart is full. I have found my purpose, my peace, my legacy. It is not in the grand gestures, not in the public declarations, but in the quiet, steady work of my hands, in the love I have given, in the forgiveness I have found. My story is a testament to the fact that you can always rebuild, you can always find your way back, you can always start over. It is a story about a father who refused to give up, a son who found his way back home, and a legacy that was built not on a single man's vision, but on a family's love. And so I close the book on this chapter of my life, a new chapter of my story, a new legacy etched in stone. And I sit here, a quiet, contented man, a father who has found his purpose again, a man who has finally come home.